Before we jump into this episode, I want to give a massive shout out to our amazing sponsor this season, Jo Higgs from Jo Higgs Creative. Jo is a freelance logo and brand designer with over a decade of experience, and she is all about helping female-led businesses stand out and attract their dream clients. Right now, Jo is offering a fantastic free downloadable guide called Building Your Brand. It dives into the basics of branding and how to really boost your brand awareness as a small business owner. Plus, there's a super helpful checklist you can go through at your own pace. You can grab it at www.joannhiggs.co.uk/free download, and I'll make sure to pop the link for that and all the ways to find out more about her in the show notes too. In the meantime though, let's get back to the episode you're here for. If you have ever scrolled through a podcast feed, found a show you love, and then realised the episodes suddenly stop with no explanation, you will know how frustrating that feels. You're left wondering whether the host gave up, whether the podcast is finished, or whether there will ever be more episodes. Well, I don't want that to be your experience here, which is why this episode goes out at the end of every season to explain why I press pause, why it matters to me, and what it means for you as a listener. So if you have just found this podcast or you've been with me from the very start, stick around, because this episode is going to give you the behind-the-scenes story of how and why I run Show Up and Be Heard in seasons, and why I believe this approach might just give you permission to slow down too. And if you're new here, hi, I am your host, Becky McAvoy. I am a multi-award-winning social media marketer, international speaker, and the dreamer behind Be Heard Socials and the Boss to Your Socials Club. I created this podcast to help women like you simplify your life and grow a business on your terms without the overwhelm. If you're ready for some no BS advice, practical tips, and honest chats that make social media and business feel lighter and more doable, then you are in exactly the right place. So let's dive into why taking a break is such an important part of the way that I run this show and my business as a whole. I want to be really transparent about how I run this podcast so that you know exactly what to expect from it and what you're going to get from it, basically. I'm generally like this with most things in business and in life because I think it's really important. And I think if more business owners did it, just running a business would be a generally better place. So I'm using this episode to explain why I run the podcast in seasons, but also this episode is going to sit at the end of every season so that if you come across the podcast and you wonder whether it's just completely stopped, you know that it hasn't. And you know very specifically that it's running in seasons and it will be back. So I made this decision before I launched the podcast that instead of running it nonstop all year round, I wanted to run it in seasons and create episodes in seasons. So each season would run for a set number of weeks and then it would pause during the school holidays. Now, a lot of the advice that I saw out there was that this was a terrible way to run a business because obviously school holidays can range from anything to taking a week's break to 2 weeks at, like Easter or Christmas to 6 to 7 weeks over the summer. And, listeners will drop off and all of that kind of stuff. And, it wasn't the best way to do things, et cetera, et cetera. And I really had to, when I started doing this, I really had to tell myself how much it mattered to me because a little story of complete honesty, when I started running it, well, there was a little bit that I panicked and I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't run a break, at least not for half terms because it's only a week. Like I could just create an extra episode. But also I was really enjoying running the podcast at that time. I ran it through the half term and pretty rapidly I was like, why are you doing that? Like you're just putting more on your plate. So I've gone back to no, if it's a school holiday, episodes aren't running. And here's why I do this. And here's why it's so important to me. I am not just a podcast host and I'm not just a business owner. I am also a mum to 2 amazing, relatively small children. And the school calendar is a big part of our family rhythm. When the school holidays roll around, I want and need to be present with my family. Now, I want to do this. I want to enjoy that time without the pressure of work and batching episodes, booking guests, or, all of the different things that sit behind a podcast and running a podcast. Like I actually take the school holidays off work now. I've set up my business so that I can take them off work. And if I am working, I'm choosing to work rather than feeling like I have to. This is because I want to do that, but I also need to. We don't really have any family support around us. My family all live almost 300 miles away from us. The family that we have got up here can't necessarily help us as much as they used to be able to with childcare and things like that. And it became a thing where we could get help and we could get help from family, but it wasn't something that we could absolutely rely on. And my husband has a very demanding job. He is employed, so he has a limited amount of leave and all of that kind of stuff. So it just became more and more apparent that I needed to do this, and thankfully I wanted to as well. So I've had to make some really difficult decisions, even when I've possibly, like I said, really enjoyed running the podcast and wanted to do more episodes, or had someone I wanted to interview or whatever it might be, to say no, like make it easier for yourself, take the pressure off of yourself. And now I stick to it. As I say, as much as I can, now I stick to it. And this is why this episode goes out at the end of every season. Because like I said, I'll be honest, I tried it the other way round. I say I tried it the other way around. Basically, the first season I ran just before the summer holidays, the first season ever of this podcast. And then I did break for the summer holidays because they're such a long holiday. But when I came back in September, I was really enjoying the podcast. I'd only just started it. I still am really enjoying it, by the way. But I was really enjoying it. I wanted to do more episodes. And like I said, I went through a half term. But I'll be honest, I just ended up, like, even though I was enjoying it, I just didn't have enough time in my calendar. Like, there's a lot that goes behind a podcast. And I had to just, like I said, say to myself, no, stick to, like, don't get overexcited. Don't get, like all wanting to do things that, even if you enjoy them, result in you being exhausted or overwhelmed in the long term. And, I told myself that I'd get ahead. I'd record a batch of episodes so I could keep releasing them during the holidays. But ultimately, that just ends up overwhelming you or burning you out, or it does me anyway. And instead of enjoying time with my kids, like I then get snappy because I've got deadlines to hit and all of this stuff to do. It didn't feel good. So basically, I've gone back to running it in seasons. And that is because I want and need this podcast and my business to fit around my life, not consume it. And when I let myself run it in seasons, it feels a lighter way to do it. It feels much more sustainable. And actually, it feels much more enjoyable. So as much as I was saying I was doing it because I was excited and I wanted to, that's sort of the key thing, isn't it? It's like, well, it stopped being enjoyable because I had too much on my plate, basically. And it felt better to do it like this. So instead of pushing myself to keep going no matter what, I plan around the life I want to live. And that means giving myself permission to step back during the school holidays, recharge, and then come back with fresh energy when the next season starts. Now, you might be wondering, why not just keep going and record around it? Or why not outsource more of the podcast production so that it doesn't have to stop? Because I could do that. I absolutely could. But here's the thing. I want this podcast to feel good for me and for you. The reality is that running a business, being a mum, being a woman, looking after my own well-being, being all the different things that I am, I have to make choices. And one of my values, I guess, or one of the things that's really important to me and that I learned the hard way, is not glorifying busyness and being busy for the sake of it. I talk about boundaries all the time, which you will know if you've listened to this podcast before. And this is me practicing what I preach. So for me, running this podcast in seasons allows me to protect my mental health and avoid burning out. It allows me to model to other women like you, hopefully, especially business owning mums, that it's okay to set boundaries and structure your work around your life, not the other way around. And it also allows me to keep the podcast sustainable long term instead of starting strong and fizzling out because I've run out of energy, and being one of those podcasts that suddenly doesn't have any more episodes and you don't know why. Also, I'll tell you what else, when you run something like a podcast or even your social media, people can tell when you're running on empty. They might not be able to put their finger on it, but they can feel the difference. I get told a lot about, like, people are attracted to my energy and my vibe. But if I push myself to churn out episodes just because I thought I should, you'd hear it in my voice. The passion would dip, the topics would feel a bit flatter. And honestly, that's not fair on you, and it's not fair on me either. I truly believe that when we give ourselves space to rest, we show up better with more creativity and more energy too. And I am really passionate about not just saying that and talking the talk, but walking the walk with it as well. And I bet that you've experienced that too. Maybe you've taken a break from your business even for a week, and suddenly the ideas start flowing again. That's what happens when we allow ourselves to rest and be part of the rhythm and just allow ourselves to slow down. So this approach isn't just about me managing my workload. It's also about me living the values I talk about here all the time, whether it's boundaries, sustainability, or building a business that supports your life, not drains it. All of those are really important, and it's me walking the walk with that. So, what does this mean for you if you're listening? It means that if you've landed on this episode and there aren't any new ones just yet, don't worry. The podcast hasn't stopped. A new season is on its way, and I'll be back soon with more episodes to help you simplify your business, look after your well-being, and remind you that success doesn't have to mean constant hustle or constantly being busy. In the meantime, you've got the entire back catalogue of episodes to dip into, and I really encourage you to do that. Each one is designed to be useful wherever you listen and whenever you listen, whether that's today, 6 months from now, or even years down the line. So if you're in a season of feeling overwhelmed, maybe go back to the episode on boundaries that I've done. I'll link to that in the show notes. I'll link to any of the episodes on boundaries that we've done. If you're struggling to get consistent with your social media, check out the episodes where I talk about what consistency actually means or break down strategy in a simple way. I will also link to both of those in the show notes. Or if you just need a bit of encouragement, dip into some of the shorter pep talk style episodes like this one. So whilst a new episode might not come out for a week or two or a 6 to 7 over the summer holidays, you can think of this podcast like a library. You don't have to start from the beginning and listen in order. You can pick and choose what you need in this season of your life and your business. So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a little encouragement. If you've been waiting for permission to slow down, here it is. If you've been thinking you need to keep pushing even when you're exhausted, I hope that hearing how I run this podcast reminds you that you don't. You're allowed to take breaks. You're allowed to work in seasons. You're allowed to protect your time and your energy. And I don't just mean if you run a podcast. This could be with your marketing, your offers, your services, even with your personal life. In fact, those pauses might be the very thing that help you keep going long term and help your podcast or social media or your whole business stick around in the long term. Just like nature works in seasons, I guess, so do we. We're not designed to be in go mode all year round, and we need to work out what's right for us. And if my podcast can show even one woman that success doesn't have to mean non-stop output and busyness, then it's doing exactly what I hoped it would when I created it in the first place. So that is why you will always find this episode at the end of each season. Thank you so much for being here, for listening and for showing up with me. If you want to know when the next season launches, the best way to stay in the loop is to follow or subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening right now. That way, when the new episodes come, they will land straight in your feed and you'll get little notifications to say that they are there. And if you'd like a little extra support in between seasons, you can always come and connect with me on Instagram or your preferred platform. I've linked to all of those in the show notes where you can find me. I would love to hear from you. Whether it's what you've taken from an episode or how you're choosing to slow down in your own life and business, it lights me up when I hear that stuff and when you've taken stuff like that from the podcast. So I will be back very soon with brand new episodes. But until then, remember, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it perfectly. And your version of success gets to be yours. In the meantime, I will see you in the next season. Thank you so much again for listening to Show Up and Be Heard, but please don't go without telling me your name. I genuinely love meeting new people and making new connections. If you don't already, I would love it if you come find me on Instagram, LinkedIn or Facebook and drop me a message to say hello and let me know what you thought of the episode. The link to all my socials are in the show notes. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode or found it useful, I would really, really appreciate if you could take just a few minutes of your day to give it a review on whatever platform you are listening on. Because every one I get really does make me do a little squeal and a genuine big happy dance. Finally, more than anything else, please always remember, realizing that you're not actually meant to do this stuff alone is the first step to making it easier. So I will see you next time.